Is Rachel. Here with this call with Rachel Schragus and her collaborator and partner in crime, Josh Yoder. I am going to present today on behalf of work that's really been done by countless people in our movement. It takes a village to make some of this to make this happen. I also want to note that this is the first time I'm sharing work like this on a call like this, and I'm a little bit nervous because I haven't done this before. I went from, in essence, a periphery member with If Not Now DC to being an art lead in the past month. And it's really been an honor in many ways. And I keep saying I wish we weren't meeting under these circumstances, but some really incredible people like Sierra and all of my slides that were at the very end. So yeah, I'm just going to talk briefly today about how we're using art or visuals to amplify our message in this moment, how we're building community through art and vice versa, and how art can play a role in the movement moving forward, and specifically highlighting things from our work of Jewish-led actions calling for ceasefire. And so jumping onto the next slide. This image is from the first action that we held as If Not Now in collaboration with JVP. It was at the White House, and where we blocked in all the entrances to the White House, and the beginning of how we began to establish ceasefire as a demand. And at that point in time, we weren't quite sure where we were going. And as a result, we made some art calls or like decisions very quickly. And so ceasefire, on to the next slide, Rachel, sorry. Ceasefire, as you can see here in this panel, gets an emphasis different than any other message. This came from a conversation about how even our aligned political leaders weren't saying ceasefire at that time. And the role of the movements was to make clear that the public was ready. They needed to hear politicians say that, say ceasefire. And we're seeing that that's working. We've made a lot of banners that say ceasefire. And so If Not Now paid artists to paint them so that we could get 11, if not, I think more, it made in like less than 48 hours. And these banners have served as a resource for general movements. They've been shared and passed along to different marches and actions over the past month, especially here in DC, although one is actually traveling to Boston this week. And so it's created a link as well for us between like Jewish and non-Jewish led movements, and created alignment around the core demand. And then speaking very specifically to some of the visuals and aesthetics, like there's a messiness to particularly like the ceasefire banners. They're not this perfect, precise thing in this effort to convey as much urgency as possible of what this moment is. And as well for If Not Now, on to the next slide. We're really considering moving forward right now what it means to create certain, like to ground our visual tradition or to ground our visuals in Jewish tradition in particular. And this is from an action in front of Congress, where again, like some of the banners and the visual language continued into the offices, but as well bringing in these new traditions in particular of the rocks and candles to highlight like the vigil, and that the rocks come very specifically from a Jewish tradition of marking like those that have died. And this is something that we, on the theme of like what art can do to bring community in, like something I have been hearing as our like new members have grown too, is that how people arrive to an action space and the atmospheres that's created by virtue of the song and by virtue of the visuals is part of the reason why they are remaining curious and engaged and showing up. It's a lot of people we've met are taking action for the first time. And so what this work can do to be like welcoming in that regard is something that we're thinking about. And then on to the next slide, very specifically, like just wanted to highlight, this is what If Not Now, we've just seen what If Not Now is now, and this is what it was then. So clearly like the visuals have played a really critical role in conveying like our power and why we're using visual strategy so strongly. And then very briefly, just wanted to speak to specifically like what it means to make art in mass. That's a little bit of a different operation, and why I think, again, sometimes we're shifting into the use of visual strategy, not necessarily art, because it takes on this different form. And on to the next slide as well. I use a lot of cooking analogies in art making, in particular when it comes to production. Like you're running a kitchen in essence. It takes it, and that's where that I think the notion as well of taking a village. And this is just to share the degrees of like kind of systems and infrastructure that can get built, and also really makes it replicable, which is really wonderful. And people can plug in really like smooth ways, and it can be used in a lot of different contexts. And then next slide. Yeah, and then again, I think like the builds are just really a tremendous way for new members in particular, in our case, to get involved. It's a little bit of a softer entry, and also just like the kind of scope of conversation that I've seen happen during a build is a really exquisite thing. And that spaciousness is something that I think that the builds like create for the people that attend, and as well, like quite literally people are watching how their actions are part of building like the movement. And then as part of the next slide, this is just briefly again highlighting like the image on the left is from New York, which was able to use like materials that we put together, files and whatnot, and then translate that to their art build. And similarly on the right is Baltimore. And so we're already seeing ways in which like we can really quickly share this across our networks. And then the next slide is an image of some art that was made at the build that Ciara and I first met at. And so I also wanted to highlight just like in closing, almost in closing, the ways in which these are resources that can be shared really widely across the movements. And as myself, as someone who's a visual, considers himself as a visual artist in DC, where that is not the most art forward place sometimes, I'm really excited to hopefully make those resources as visible and transparent and as accessible as possible. And so in kind of just in closing, we have our Rachel and Josh and some others have consolidated and created a variety of resources specifically for some of the visual strategy techniques that I was highlighting, that we were talking about. And I think that is that for now. Thank you all so much. And I would not be on this call if not for an art build as well. So that's my closing. Thank you.
I love that. Art build saved my life. Rachel S., did you want to talk a little bit about what Rachel just shared, the project that you and Josh have going on?
Sure. It's such an honor to be with y'all. I love that the two Jewish artists talking are Rachel and Rachel, as just like could not be more classic. I'm so proud of how many people have my Jewish name. Not that all Jews, all Rachels are Jewish. Yeah, Rachel and I met in this work recently, and Josh and I are just mostly here to cheer and support. And I also wanted to shout out Sarah. I just love the breakdown of all the imagery that thank you so much for that education. And the thing that I'd add is that I think like we're representing just one thread of an incredible, a new universe of visual work in the street that we're seeing just emerge in real time. And the intense, beautiful, deep challenge of being in the Jewish corners of that right now, where so much of our cultural practice has been co-opted by military Zionist forces. Like, what imagery do we and can we use to show what our people stand for? And you'll see there's not a lot of imagery in our work yet, and in some ways that's appropriate, right? Like the sign that stands behind the olives and the finches, and right in the march. And in some ways we're asking each other that question in the movement, and if you're asking it too, I'd love to be in touch.